I'm Lisa Thie, the Data for Good sector lead at Launch Consulting. I recently had the honor of speaking at the World AI Cannes Festival, where AI innovators and enthusiasts come together to bring a world of imagination to life. This year's speakers are leveraging AI to create a better world, with emerging technologies capable of solving our greatest global challenges. Join me as I speak with some of the innovators who are forging this future. This is Navigating Abroad. In this episode, I'm talking with Carolyn Peer, the CEO and co-founder of Humaxa, a pioneer in the human capital management industry. Combining cognitive neuroscience experience with world-class machine learning, Carolyn draws from her unique perspectives on human connection to help both employees and businesses become the best versions of themselves. Hi, Carolyn. Welcome to Cannes. So nice to see you.
So glad to be here, Lisa. Thanks for taking the time to talk.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up and your journey towards getting here? How did you become interested in AI?
Sure. So very early on, when I was an undergraduate, I became fascinated with how machines learn, how people learn, and how you can get the best of both worlds by putting the two together. How machines can help people do machine things and how people can help machines do people things. And create the sort of win-win situation, which is what I ended up writing my thesis on when I was an undergraduate. And at the time, I honestly don't even know if really artificial intelligence was what everybody called it, but it was absolutely fascinating to me. And I ended up writing programs that simulated human learning. And I thought that was the basis for the rest of my career, having no idea what I wanted to do, except I knew I didn't want to be locked in a lab somewhere, never talking to people and just writing code. So I ended up, fast forward a few years later on, ended up working at a small HR tech startup called Proudest. And I started off as an instructional designer there. I wrote simulations for training, and then ended up growing the team. We grew the company, starting when I started, it was about 50 people, and then by the time there was about 800 at its peak, it ended up getting acquired, and I ended up going to the mothership company, running one of their learning and performance organizations for ADP national accounts. The biggest clients. And during that whole period of time, listening to both employees and clients talk about what they wanted in the workplace and realizing that they were actually asking for the same things, but from two totally different perspectives. So there was this huge overlap of what makes an employee successful, what makes a company successful, that there was just this complete lack of communication around. And so clients would say things like, gosh, Carolyn, we have all this data. Why can't we do a better job of predicting these problems that may eventually arise within our workforce? And I thought, that's something we can do.
So having a cognitive neuroscience background allowed you to be hearing all the pull from the potential customers of the future through ADP. You were able to hear that business need, recognize that the technology had advanced enough in cloud computing and with processing power to make that a reality.
Exactly. Yes, when I first started studying it, the compute power just wasn't there. Everything was slow, it was clunky, it was just, decision trees and that sort of thing. There wasn't the level and the immediacy that you can do now, which is exciting.
It is a moment in time, isn't it?
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your company, Humaxa, and what you found it to do and how you're growing today?
Sure. When we first started in 2017, really our first idea was, how do we listen to data and make predictions about the workforce, knowing that companies, their number one expense and their number one valuable asset is their people, right? I mean, it would make sense to really understand and figure out how to maximize the single most valuable and expensive thing on your balance sheet, right?
Yep.
So we had thought about doing all these different data listening. What can we listen to? Can we listen to email? When are people sending emails? What's being said? And at the time, it was right around the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And it just, everybody said, just don't do it. It's creepy, don't do it, even if it's for good. I mean, it really was to help both employees and the employer, but it didn't matter.
Well, it's also tricky, right? Once you develop that capability, you could be using it for a really good purpose. But if your company gets acquired, your IP is now in the hands of someone else, and you have no control over how it's used.
It's all about data.
Yes, absolutely. So you ruled that one out. And where did you go next?
So where we went next was, well, let's not listen to data that exists all over the organization. Let's figure out a way to motivate people to talk with an anonymous digital assistant, where they're going to actually gain some sort of immediate value out of having this conversation. And that way, we still get data, maybe not as much data, but very pointed and actionable data that's specifically about the workplace. Let's make it anonymous so people feel safe talking about what's really happening, and make it instantaneously meaningful for the employee. While all these anonymous conversations are going on, all this data is being gathered, then it can be presented back to the organization to really get ahead of any problems that might be starting just beneath the surface within the workforce, so you can just nip it in the bud and that it doesn't become a problem in the first place.
So you're really looking for those moments that matter when your high caliber employees are starting to signify that maybe they're getting close to burnout, maybe they're not feeling supported, maybe they are interested in growing in new and different ways. By being able to tune into that early, you can take action to make sure that they stay part of the organization and feeling valued and heard. Is that the reason that Humaxa exists?
Yes, there are key points in a person's career that you really want to pay attention to, but sometimes it's random. There's a lot of personal things that affect your performance at work too.
Absolutely.
And being able to stay on top of all of that and provide the right resources and really get ahead of anything that's going on there too. And sometimes it can just be one person in a key role, maybe an implementation manager that's in the middle of implementing a huge $20 million account. If that person leaves, there's an enormous chance that that is going to go south.
Yep.
And that's a huge, huge problem money-wise. And it's only one person. So yeah, each person counts.
Absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit more about your why? What inspires you on the days when you are tired from running a company and growing a business and all the hats that you have to wear? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, there's a lot of times I wish I had a Max. So Max is our AI assistant. We affectionately call him Max, where I wish I'd had a Max that I could have talked to and really gotten my voice heard. Where I've worked, I've been lucky. I've had really good managers, but there have been some other incidents I really wish that I had been able to surface, and I never felt comfortable doing so. And I certainly never was offered any kind of instant help or, any feedback or options. It was more just, internalize it, move forward,
suck it up, rub a little dirt in it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Which works for a while, but not forever, right?
Exactly.
So how does Max help aggregate information for managers to be able to internalize what's happening?
So for example, inclusion in the workplace is a topic that Max talks about with employees. And it may be, going along pretty well, and all of a sudden there's a big drop. So when that happens and it reaches a threshold, Max will send an alert to the manager or to the leader who's responsible for that group, and will say, hey, there's something wrong here. You need to go pay attention and see what's going on. And in that case, the manager or the senior leader may take the opportunity to have a live anonymous conversation with people who have surfaced these things without either person having to know who the other person is, just to really get into the root cause of what's going on.
So it can be facilitated by chat through venues like Slack or Teams, so that you know you're talking to someone, but you don't know who it is.
Correct.
I imagine the trickier the topic, the more that anonymity matters.
Absolutely.
Can you share with us a little bit around what you've seen in terms of trends on diversity and inclusion, or any of the other hot topics that people are thinking about?
Sure. Someone in one of our client organizations talked about the workplace and specifically about inclusion and said, things are pretty good here. I feel like we have opportunity, but then there's this problem of the dude wall. And I personally didn't know what that term meant. I thought, dude wall. And so I went and quickly looked it up. And so there's a lot of sort of organizations that have been around a long time have a tendency to kind of put their company history up on the wall as you walk in. Like the first thing you see when you walk in is this wall with all of the presidents and, dating back to 1950 or whatever it is. And in this case, it was all men. There wasn't one woman president in the history. Yeah. And so this is something that came up, and what I understand is now, even though they haven't had a female president, they're finding other women who have been, important for the history of the company. They're putting them on the wall too, which is great. It's not all men.
There's a place for you to rise here.
Exactly. But these are the kind of things that if you just are used to walking in and out of a building all the time, you may not even realize what the perception is. And it's not intentional. It's just habit. And then it takes having a safe place to kind of talk about these things that it thinks, yeah, there's not a single woman on this wall. Let's change that.
Opportunity. Yes. What are some trends you're seeing happening out there today in the workforce that you think people should be paying more attention to?
Trends in the workforce. I mean, obviously the last couple of years has been an enormous disruption where nothing has been taken for granted anymore. It was always before taken for granted that you go to work at 8 o'clock, you leave at 5 or 6 o'clock. Like, what does it even mean to be in a workplace?
Yeah.
So being able to stay on top of those trends and how it affects performance, how it affects productivity, how it affects well-being, how it affects engagement. I mean, there's so many aspects there that are in flux. I think it's more important than ever to stay on top of that and make sure that you're still, as a company, you're still able to maximize your human capital, your most valuable thing, and work on behalf of the employees themselves, because it's win-win.
Yeah, and as we've shifted to remote work and now probably back to some form of hybrid work, going to the employees where they are versus relying on hallway conversations is going to be critical, right?
Yes.
So how does Humaxa help in remote workforce kinds of applications?
So you mentioned like hallway conversations. I honestly think that hallway conversations are still going to happen. It's just happening in a different way. And in a lot of cases, Max, our assistant, can help make that happen. So for example, let's say 5 years ago, I had a marketing video and I wanted to get my coworkers' feedback on it. Just perception, like, what's your first feeling? Does it make you feel happy? Does it make you feel sad? That's harder to do when maybe one person's in the office and your other 9 friends, or who knows, maybe they're even in a different time zone, you don't know. Yeah. Or it's like, who should I go ask for feedback on that? So in this case, you can use Max to go find 10 people to give you feedback on something that maybe would have just happened in a hallway, like, hey, come take a look at this. So things like that, I think the dynamics are changing, how it's happening is changing, but the need to be able to just get that quick instantaneous feedback on something is never going away. So it's just changing.
What are some of the proudest accomplishments you've had with Humaxa so far?
Gosh, I think the scope of what we're trying to do, having 11,000 people use a platform that you created from nothing, that's a that's something to kind of feel good about. But honestly, we're just getting started. 11,000 seems like a lot, but especially from a data and AI standpoint, we need millions and millions of data sets, not just as many as we have. So we're trying to make a difference everywhere, all over the world, slowly but surely.
Give everyone a voice.
Absolutely.
And what have you learned from some of your early failures?
I think just understanding how difficult it is to build something from scratch, that's a pretty big task to take on. And an early failure would just be thinking we were much further along than we actually were.
We never learned from our early successes. We learned a lot more from the things that go sideways. And that's the whole point of entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
Going back to the grind and tuning it up and facing another day.
Yes, exactly.
So for other founders that are looking to follow in your footsteps, or entrepreneurs and companies that are really interested in bringing innovation to bear, what are some of your words of wisdom as you want to bring disruption to the workplace to benefit everyone?
Oh gosh. I think plan for the worst case scenario. I think it's one of the things that I learned very on was to listen to what others had gone through. And I specifically remember reading some feedback from early entrepreneurs who had talked about it not so much being a grind, but being a soul-crushing grind. That's something that it's hard to be prepared for. It's really hard.
Yeah, I think speaking as an entrepreneur for my time in large corporations, it can feel less soul-crushing, but there is a lot of momentum moving the organization a certain way. So sometimes you feel like the salmon swimming upstream, trying to change the focus, and that can be a bit daunting as well.
Yes.
What I loved about entrepreneurship is it really frees you to go from being part of a larger organization into somebody that can step out and lead.
Yes.
And if you're an inspirational enough leader that people want to follow you, you can really grow in that capacity, which you obviously have. So Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your work with Humaxa. Any parting words that you want to share for people that want to follow your company's journey?
Well, of course, we'd love to talk to anyone who's interested in learning more about Humaxa or about entrepreneurship. I personally feel really strongly about needing help, but also giving back. So it's a push-pull. So we'd love to get help, and we'd love to be a help to others, and that would be great.
And where can they find more information about Humaxa?
So we're at www.humaxa.com, Humaxa.com. So just like it sounds. And I'm Carolyn Peer. You can find me at carolyn.peer@humaxa.com.
Thank you so much.
Yes.